Hello and salutations to you all. Welcome to the Philos-Hippie, a brand new channel where we explore together the intersection of spirituality and philosophy, and how they can be used to help us lead more holistic and meaningful lives. Now, today I want to just give a brief channel intro and give you an idea as to who I am and what we will be learning together in this here podcast. So, to start off with, a little bit about me. I have been a seeker for most of my life. I was born Catholic, converted to Protestantism, and desired to go into ministry to serve God and others until all that came crumbling down as I deconstructed my faith and the dogmatic truth claims that formed a core integral part of my identity. However, after my deconstruction, I still had a lingering taste for the transcendent in my mouth, and I embarked upon a spiritual quest to reclaim that sense of wholeness once more, but permanently this time. So, this led me to go to university and study philosophy, since so much of religion is predicated by it. I had recently just graduated with my bachelor's in philosophy in the past year or so, and while I learned much about the history of ideas and how they evolved throughout time and culture, I can't help but feeling that something crucial was still lacking in my education and my spiritual quest. My school was pretty steeped within the Anglo American analytical tradition, and because of that, much of our texts were based on logic and were incredibly boring and dense to read with little to no practical value in the real world, in my opinion. My professors' lectures were incredibly monotone, dry, and cringy, with very outdated thought experiments and examples that they would constantly repeat. I could tell that they love the intellectual pursuit of philosophy and having discussions about abstract ideas, and I'm not here to dog on them. But that was basically the only extent to which philosophy impacted their lives. It was their profession after all, and it kind of just stayed in the classroom. A, pro- a profession that was rapidly disintegrating to the neoliberalization of universities and the death of humanities. What's worse is that most of my professors' attempts to get new students enrolled in philosophy have ultimately failed. None of my classmates bothered to listen or take notes if they even managed to make it to class that day. If they did manage to make it to class, no one would discuss their views and they'd all just try to hide behind their computer screens to avoid any social interactions. My school's philosophy staff has also been sliced in half 10 years ago, and only a handful of aging professors still remain. I could feel the agonizingly slow death in my department the most when I was the only student who showed up to a class for nearly half a semester. I can understand why the pursuit of philosophy wasn't having the same effect on my peers and my professors like it did for me. Now, for me, ever since I was a child, I've always been curious about the nature of reality and, more importantly, how to live a meaningful life. Probably due to some underlingering trauma I've yet to unpack yet, or maybe being a seeker has always been a part of my destiny, if you believe in that, if I even believe in that. But I always viewed philosophy not as some academic discipline, but rather as a way of life. What is the point of knowledge and wisdom if it does not fundamentally change who you are deep down to your core? I always thought that philosophy was not meant to be restricted to thought experiments, but rather sought after experience. I've always been plagued by pragmatism, and unless an idea can be utilized in my life, I'll toss it in the trash. The wise philosopher Epicurus once said that the words of that philosopher who offers no therapy for human suffering are empty and vain. The ancient Greeks, like Epicurus, all truly embody philosophy in the deepest essence. They lived it out. When you break down the word philosophy, you get the ancient Greek words for philia and sophia, which just means simply love of wisdom. For the ancients, theory came second and only in order to support the flourishing of their lives. If the knowledge they were gaining did not have any wisdom in it, they dismissed it because it had no practical benefit for improving their lives, society, and the cosmos. Much of modern philosophy today is empty and vain in this regard, and it doesn't seek to heal the soul anymore like the ancients did. The ancients viewed philosophy as the art of living first and foremost. But how exactly does one foster this perspective? That is what I am humbly and modestly trying to do here with this new channel. I never really had a guiding example as to how to live philosophy as a way of life, and this channel is an attempt at describing that process. So I hope you will join me as we discover this together. In this channel, we will be exploring the fundamental boundaries between philosophy and spirituality. Now, I believe that philosophy and spirituality are deeply intertwined with each other, and that the former can provide guidance and clarity on the latter, so that we can embark upon our spiritual quests with greater confidence and authenticity while living out our truth. I suspect that whoever finds their way into this niche corner of the internet will more than likely label themselves as spiritual but not religious. Now, this phrase is very confusing and pretty vague too, so that's the first thing we will be exploring together in this podcast after this episode, and how one navigates within this ethereal space in greater depth. So many people in my generation today are lost, confused, and traumatized either from their religious upbringing or facing the very grave despairs of alienation and nihilism in our late stage capitalistic era. I want to help shine a light for people and show them that despite everything being meaningless, it doesn't have to be. After Nietzsche's famous proclamation that God is dead nearly 150 years ago, he suggested for us to embark on the transvaluation of all values, where we forge for ourselves what our most precious beliefs and values are, and not through some church order or what our utilitarian society deems as acceptable today. However, in the 21st century, we live in a time in which so many conflicting values and ideologies and spiritual practices are all constantly vying for our attention. It's a very messy and murky process trying to sort one's life out from within the swirling vortex of chaotic values. That is exactly what this channel seeks to provide. How does one determine their own values? How does one create spiritual meaning in their lives without traditional conceptions of God? How does one live philosophy as a way of life and truly embody it? How can we remain spiritual in our secular age today that's vastly disenchanted? Can we breathe awe and wonder once again into our normal everyday lives, infuse each day with novelty? And how can philosophy be a form of spirituality? And how can it be conducive to spiritual and personal growth? These are only some of the questions that we will be exploring together in this channel, and I hope you'll join me in that. This is the Philosophy, and together I hope we can journey this mystical trip called life together as we seek the truth of our lives together. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next episode.